Hello everyone, and welcome to this next video discussion in the series of our RICS Tech Partner Programme discussions. My name is Andrew Knight and I've been with RICS for nearly 11 years now. I work within the standards, regulatory and thought leadership part of the organisation, and my role is to look at the impact of data and technology right across the built and natural environment. With over 130,000 members worldwide, our members are working right across the property life cycle on land, rural, residential, commercial, alternative assets and infrastructure. So a very, very wide range of practice areas where obviously data and tech is having a huge effect. And I'm really glad today to be talking to Daniel from Conqa. Please join me, Daniel.
Hi, Andrew. How's it going?
Hi, great, very good. Great to have him on the call today. So yeah, first obvious question, Daniel, is to give us a bit of a backstory on your skills and experience. So do tell us what your kind of background is.
Awesome. So I'm one of the three co-founders of Conqa currently. I was initially a mechanical engineer, studied at university in Auckland, did some experience in product design both here and actually in the UK for a few years before starting Conqa, which is a quality assurance software solution for the construction industry. We work in across predominantly APAC at the moment with a large amount of customers, particularly in New Zealand and Australia, originally from New Zealand, if you haven't picked up by the accent. And we work on both infrastructure, horizontal construction, and a lot of building work. And that's typically on the larger scale side of things. 50 million would be this sort of minimum spot for us. It goes, our biggest project's 1.5 billion into the scope of work. So that's where we focus, and I'll share a bit more on particularly what the product does and what we do throughout the conversation.
Indeed, Daniel. And to sort of distill it, what's the problem that Conqa's trying to solve in the sector?
So the real core problem that the industry's being challenged with, that we're trying to solve for, is rework, which is basically where someone makes a mistake, has to go back and fix it, and they have a cost associated to that. So in most instances, like for the subcontractor who's typically doing that construction activity, it'll triple the cost almost for that work, because they paid their team to do it the first time. Then they have to go back and pay to do it the second time, and then there's the opportunity cost of what they could have been doing. Mm-hmm. But that really starts to cascade and become far more significant on a construction project, because everything's so tightly sequenced. So one subcontractor follows the other. And if you have a mistake and that throws the sequence out, that creates coordination issues, and there's disputes and everything else that fall off the back of that. And so there's a lot of studies, and they are primarily studies because it's difficult to track all the stuff. It's what's happening at site level. But one particular out of the UK from the Get It Right initiative showed that the cost of rework was about 21%. Actually, I use this slide here. I'm going to show you on our onboarding presentation. Where is it? Here. Sorry, I'm ahead of myself. This one, Rework. So this actually shows a breakdown of the cost of rework. So the direct cost is what I just spoke about. That's what the subcontractor pays. The indirect costs, which is the coordination, the arguing, everything of that instance. Can you still see my screen? Sorry, just jump. Sorry, can we just have another crack at that?
Yeah, sure.
Last bit, because the thing was covering it up and I kept playing with it.
So do you want to unshare your screen, and then I'll ask that question again? So there we go.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Obviously, we're gonna have to do it based off the questions, right?
Yeah. No worries. Don't worry. So I'll start again with that one about what's the problem that Conqa's trying to solve. So
cool.
So I'll give some dead air. So what's the problem that Conqa's trying to solve?
The core problem that we're trying to solve for the industry is around rework, which is basically where someone is doing work, they make a mistake, it's picked up after they completed the work, and they have to go back and fix it. And so the initial instance of this kind of happens at the subcontractor level, where the subcontractor, it could be a plumber, for example, and again, he's on large scale projects, makes a mistake in their work, it's picked up by the following subcontractor or the main contractor, and they call the subcontractor back in to fix it. Now, that largely triples the cost of that activity because someone's been paid to do it the first time. They've then been called back and have to pay for someone to do it a second time, but there's that opportunity cost of what they could have and should have been doing otherwise. And so it's expensive for the subcontractor, but it also has costs for the head contractor who's coordinating the work because everything's so tightly sequenced in a linear fashion throughout construction, and they layer one on top of the other. So if there is a mistake and another subcontractor has to work around them, it puts chaos into the building sequence, and it can end up, if you do that a few hundred or thousands of times, it becomes very expensive. And the studies that have been conducted on this, one of the most prominent ones was done by the Get It Right initiative out of the UK, and it showed that rework costs about 21%. And I've actually got a little slide here that'll show you the breakdown of how that comes to be. Yeah, so this is the breakdown of the rework cost. So the direct cost, which I was just talking about, making a mistake, going back to fix it, the labor and materials that go into it, that makes about 5%. And this is overall like construction value. The indirect cost, which is the resequencing, the time spent in dispute, the negotiations that come out of it, that ends up being about 7%. The latent defects, which are the ones that people are most probably familiar with, which is when the asset's been finished and there's a leaky building or what have you, that's actually 3%. And then the unreported waste, which is basically where people make mistakes and didn't report it, they kind of brushed over it, makes up about 6%. So, I mean, in a $10 trillion industry, it's a very, very large problem. And one of the key mechanisms to prevent rework from happening, I'll stop sharing my screen here, is quality assurance. And which is basically a process that says, here's you're human, you're quite likely to forget things, so let's plan a series of checks and imbalances in advance that you'll go through and check off when you're doing that activity. An example in a day-to-day life would be going to the supermarket and writing out your supermarket shopping list before you go. That's a quality assurance activity in effect at a simpler level. And the main mechanism for this happening is basically checklists, and the platform that's commonly used is paper or sometimes clunky technologies that aren't really geared towards that person on the ground, particularly the subcontractor who's doing it. And so the problem Conqa is addressing with Rework is by trying to make the QA process function well, because what we've found that happens is that most of the time those checklists or inspection and test plans are being filled out at the end of the week or the end of the month, long after that construction work is finished, and therefore the work never actually sees the benefit of the QA process. So at a primary level, we help our customers to plan out the work that they need to do in a series of activities in accordance with their build sequence. They can pull out a mobile phone, access that activity within the space of a few seconds. It's designed to be super user friendly so that someone who's been doing form work for 30 years can use the product. Like, they're really like the key target for that interface. And then they can go through and do their QA process and capture the records and just basically make it function using technology and making it easy at its core level. So that's really what we're targeting in the market.
Indeed. And what's the origin story of Conqa? How did you come to start it?
Well, funnily enough, so as I mentioned, I was a mechanical engineer before this, and my two other co-founders, Pete was also an engineer. Barney was in the art space, but so none of us had construction backgrounds, in fact, or software backgrounds. But we had seen people start software businesses, mostly in a business-to-business space, a B2B area, and start them without having tech experience before. So you could build a software business without having the capabilities of coding software. And kind of inspired by their success, we took the approach of trying to find a problem in a market that could be solved with software. And we went exploring it from that perspective initially, kind of with the business model of a subscription type, like software as a service type model. there at the core at the start, and we went looking for industries that we could try and solve. And as I mentioned, a couple of us did engineering, and we had peers who'd done civil engineering working on sites as site engineers, and they were complaining about this process called quality assurance. And we were like, what is it? And they go, there's checklists to make sure that we're doing everything properly, a bunch of paperwork basically. And they said, if we're doing it properly, it's about 40 minutes of admin each day they were approximately spending on it. After spending 4 years at university, they were rather frustrated with that, but they sort of said the reality of it is, and these were major assets. These are like highways. They were like, the reality of it is that we'll sit there and sign it off at different colored pens at the end of the week before we hand the section back to the client, to make it look like we've done it. And so that was, that was really kind of, that catalyzed our investigation into this. And I think, I'm 32 now. We were about 25 at the time.
Yeah.
And, kind of by the nature of who we could talk to, or who was prepared to talk to us, I should say.
Yes.
We ended up talking primarily to people at the ground level. So we would just cold call projects and say, hey, we're doing a project on quality assurance. Can we come talk to you about it and why it is or isn't working for you? And the common theme basically was, it's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's fine.
But yeah, I'll use their language. It was, and they sort of they said, the number one thing that came out of all of it was just make it easy, and that's really been the key to our success. Is those initial user conversations, I guess, where we spoke to the site foreman or the site supervisors or their project managers about why this process wasn't working for them. We ended up talking to directors as well, and it had a more indirect consequence on their bottom lines, but the real focus on why the process wasn't working started at the ground level. And from having a really good understanding of the problem and building out some initial workflows that we showed to them in PowerPoint, approximations, we then found a software developer on Facebook and a tech ecosystem thing. We gave them a bit of equity, and they were prepared to work for not a huge wage.
Yeah.
We got a little bit of investment from an advisor who we'd been talking to early on, and kind of really sort of started the company. This is back in 2015 from that level. And then I guess over the journey, we realized more and more about the context of the problem and how big it was, and where the responsibility sat, and really how it was primarily had to start at the subcontractor level. So yeah, that was kind of how we started the business, and I guess it's been almost 7 years now since we've been playing with the idea and working on it, and the platform's been live for about 6 now.
All right. So I mean, what are the biggest challenges you're still seeing in this market, in this QA space?
I think part of the biggest challenges, one is still honestly the incumbent technology solution. Businesses we work with, Multiplex, Lendlease, well-known names in both markets. Even on their sites, in some cases, the common mechanism for doing QA is paper.
Yeah.
So there's a technology problem at that level. Basically, it's still very manual. But I also think, I've got actually a quick slide here to show. I mean, this will be very familiar to a lot of your members, I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen this before. It's been bandied around for a while. The point being, right here at the bottom is the construction industry with its digitization, and I'm sure all your members listening to this will be very familiar with, the struggles with productivity growth that are happening in the market. And I think from our perspective, because we, work with, the client and the head contractor and the subcontractor, we get quite an interesting lens. Also, through the client, we work with quantity surveys as well. Get quite an interesting lens on the construction industry by really understanding the problems of all stakeholders. And I think, broadly speaking, one of the industry's biggest challenges is that the subcontractor market isn't often at the table for the digitalization conversation, or more specifically from a tech provider's point of view. A lot of solutions out there aren't geared towards people on the ground.
Yeah.
They are more geared to, the boardroom or the head office to meet their requirements, but they don't bring that part of the workforce to the table, which is like the bulk of the workforce. I think one of the head contractors I was talking to recently said about 85% of spend on a project goes to the subcontractor, parts of the work and their contracts, including their supply, obviously. And so you have got, in many cases, that part of the industry not at the digital table. Design, I think, is very well grasped. Still work to do in the BIM space and design collaboration, but I think the biggest opportunity for the market is really in, the subcontractors and their quality and their productivity. And I think, through the lens of where we sit, helping them to get it right, and then, ensuring that rework problem starts to diminish because it's being done correctly at that coalface level. Is certainly an exciting thing to be kind of working in.
Indeed. And where do you see the product going in the future?
Well, the interesting thing is, like, what I love about working in the space that we do is it's often the customers who are the innovators. So, like, some of the things that have been being used at the moment is really around like how the data out of the QA process is being used. So QA is a time-bound activity when it's done properly. Like, if you're doing some work and you're going through and checking that you're doing it correctly and effectively signing it off, once that checklist is completed or that ITP is completed, it gives you confidence that that work has actually been inspected, from a subcontractor level, that the head contractor can then go and re-inspect over the top of it or bring the next trade in, for example. And so that's one element where it's being used. The other one as well is around payment and progress claims, which I think ties more interestingly into your membership space, because I'm sure when many of them are assessing claims, they'll be receiving them from either if they're working for a head contractor, they'll be receiving them from the subcontractors, or if they're working for the principal, there'll be an element of ambiguity potentially, and an element of maybe like a few things stretched here and there. And it's just difficult, I think, to assess that type of work, in a regular ongoing basis during the construction process. And so what our customers are doing is basically taking the reports and the evidence of, here's all the QA, here's the bulk details of, all of the, apartments or the pours concrete pours that I've done, and that goes through at the end of the month with the claim. And they're also able to get like summary reports of kind of the key milestones and things that they've hit. But what that's helping our customers to do is basically just like remove the argument around the back and forth on how much they think they've done. Some of them are getting paid, 100% of their claims without any argument, because it's just like the evidence is there immediately. And so I think, the opportunities for us really exist in taking this kind of process that's been really broken and really like a pain, to use it again, pain in the ass for people on the ground, and trying to make that existing workflow function, basically making that as painless as possible. But then you get these kind of derivative benefits out of it, which are being used to help inform contractual claims or contractual discussions as well, because they're taking photos systematically through the work. Like if it's like, well, hold on, you handed this over late, our customer could go, well, yes, I did, but actually here's the evidence of where I couldn't start, according to the program. So it's not my fault that, that this was delayed. This was a coordination issue. So it just brings more honesty to that. And then, like being able to pull the data in and sort of, I'll show you quickly.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, without, trying to do a sales pitch, but what this shows is basically multiple areas and individual subcontractors, and this is from a demo project, but like those individual this would be like first fix, for example, for your services and mechanical. That would correspond to the mechanical contractor, and these green ticks and yellow dots and reds show statuses of work completion, basically. And so these dashboards, again, which have been used for a long time, where people will mark up on a wall chart where they're at, it's a digital representation of it, but it helps to keep things on track. If someone's saying, I'm claiming for level 6 because I've done all of my piping install, this should balance up with that. And if it doesn't, the head contractor can go, well, actually, you're claiming that you're done, or you're trying to tell me that you're done, and I'm bringing in the next trade to line the walls, but you haven't actually shown that you've inspected it. So please inspect it first, and what have you. And they just have that layer of information. But that's kind of the the opportunities that we're finding that are coming out of this. And this is, as I said at the start of this question, it's really our customers who are driving it into that space, and we're finding it very interesting, and then trying to go, well, how can we make this easier for that to be universally done for all of the contractors who we work with.
I mean, essentially, the power here is that by gathering this QA information as a foundation, all these other kind of benefits spin from it. As you say, you derive so many benefits from it. Once you have this information digitalized, you can do analytics, as you say. It makes it easier to look at those claim issues. So it's really kind of raw data in some respects for lots of different other benefits, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I think that the opportunity, so this stuff is happening at the moment, things I've been talking about. The opportunities in the future is once you can start tying this a bit more systematically to program or dates and milestones, and you get larger data sets, you could, theoretically, I think we're working towards it, is like predict time to completion, and actually understand, based on where the trades are signing off against and where they said they would, your actual likelihood of hitting a completion date, and therefore, how do you resource up to make sure that you're going to stay on track or what have you. But yeah, the exciting part is really like what you can start to do with this information. But the fundamental thing for us is mostly around getting it in the first place. And so you just got to make it so easy and like so relevant to that person on the ground to get the engagement that drives everything else.
So, I mean, how would you summarize the future of QA then? What do you think this will look like in 2, 3, 4, 5 years?
Well, like I think that QA is, like health and safety has been on a journey for the last number of years, is like a massive cultural shift in the industry, and I think that's been the right focus. I think safety and well-being is the #1 priority. And I think what we're seeing now is a general trend of quality assurance becoming almost on par in terms of certainly progressing towards that where health and safety currently sits. And so I think a cultural shift is happening there. But what I think is likely to start happening as there's more technology and these other derivative benefits that we've just discussed that come out of the QA process, like the rework challenges that we're seeing. And I'm not saying that subcontractor QA will solve the 21%, but like you will start to see, I think, a lot stronger, like there'll be a faster cultural acceleration because of the other incentives that are falling out of this. So one of the things we're looking at the moment is again around that payment and space, but can subcontractors get cash flow loans based on the likelihood of getting paid, which in that case, or even on a general progress claim case, creates an incentive around doing quality assurance, which is now tied to payment. And getting paid is probably one of the strongest incentives that anyone can have. And so through adding the other incentives to it, from I'm using this to help coordinate my information, I'm using this to to help inform how as the company's owner is going to get paid. These other things will make it not just like a cultural shift that is being done because people think it's the right thing to do, or because it's a compliance mechanism that just kind of has to be done. It'll have a stronger push in a positive incentivization manner, and it'll become far more reinforcing. Like doing because when people do the work, like we've had customers who've massively reduced their defect rates by using our product and having leadership engage with how it's being used. It makes more money for them, and then if it becomes the thing that starts to help keep them paid, there's this beautiful reinforcing loop. And I think rework will start to, drop off quite quickly. And I think in the next like 10 years, the productivity challenges that are being, and that have plagued the industry for a while will start to change quite dramatically.
Yeah.
As the level of digitization that we've seen in the design space makes its way to site. And so QA will be part of that. I think the future of QA is going to be viewed as no longer this pain in the ass thing that I got to do to, for what have you, to do like a much more prominent, like front of mind. This is how we get paid. This is how things get coordinated. But yeah, no, it's an exciting thing, and obviously, it's the world I live in, so I find it probably more exciting than most. But yeah, like the way that some of our customers use the product is just like really inspiring. So
I suppose that's always the thing, that you learn so much from the way people actually use a product that you didn't necessarily think of yourself, and that positive feedback loop of how the market uses it, how people actually find value from it, is, I suppose, part of the exciting side of how you evolve the solution, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, this goes back to how we started the company. Like none of us knew, we weren't from the construction industry to begin with. Didn't really know that much about quality assurance, and we didn't know much about software, but like the way that the construction industry works and comes together and how QA fits into it has been like probably the most fascinating like little adventure of my life, because it's the cool thing is that subcontractor quality and people getting it right at that level like benefit everyone.
Yeah.
Like right through to the homeowner. The only people that might lose out is maybe dispute lawyers, but like yeah, sorry if any of them are watching, but
they're not watching.
but if that might be the only place that it does, but everyone else wins. Like the head contractor, the client, everyone benefits when they get it right. And so it's really cool to be working with companies that are so like driven towards kind of doing that, and then championing the change that we think that the industry, like they're the leaders, and then other customers and other companies will follow.
Yeah, and I think it's also fascinating that point you made, that so often technology is initially kind of proposed or sold to the project sponsors at the top level, and as you say, so much of the productivity gains are there to be delivered by those various layers of subcontractors getting digitization within their processes. And I think it's an important point there, that we as a sector have perhaps addressed it from the wrong direction, in that sense of saying, well, actually we need to, as you say, I think your client quoted like 85% of cost or whatever, or people were from the subcontractors, and that's the bulk of the industry, and digitization is in danger of passing them by if we just think about the design phase of the BIM and the geometry, and not, dare I say it, the day-to-day work that actually happens on site. So that's an important takeaway, I think.
100%. I mean, what you've touched on there is kind of something that we've seen so much in the industry, like the way that clients, for example, have traditionally viewed quality, or like how they're approaching quality is basically by going, this is a head contractor's responsibility, and therefore we're going to work, partner with a really like reputable head contractor who's got these processes in place. But it's not actually the head contractor who's going to be responsible for the quality assurance part of it. That's the subcontractor. And there's a gap in the a step in the supply chain, I should say, that can kind of in some cases obfuscate what's actually happening in that instance. And so the advantages of using technology solutions that span down to the subcontractor is that clients and co can start to get visibility. Everyone's just on the same page, and it comes from that subcontractor's mobile phone, filtered or what have you, through to like an end client. And I think as they get more visibility and awareness of that, again, it's going to drive further incentivization about people doing the right thing, trying to get their work right in the first place.
Indeed. Well, it's been a fascinating conversation, and it's illuminated a lot of interesting issues in the sector. So it's been great to talk today, Daniel. And I look forward to catching up with you later in the year and seeing how things are going. But for today, thanks very much. It's been great.
Thank you so much, Andrew. And thanks to your members for listening. It's been a real pleasure to be on.